They said I could take it. As if strength was something I signed up for. As if I asked for that badge. They said it when I was 9, maybe 10. When my mother left the dinner table mid-argument and my father slammed the cupboard instead of his fist. I didn't cry. I cleared the dishes. I wiped the counter. I made sure my little brother didn't hear too much. And someone I can't remember who patted my head and said, "You're strong, baby. You've always been strong," like it was a prize. I didn't feel strong. I felt cold, quiet, like the air had gone missing in the room. But I nodded and I smiled. That's what they needed from me. That's what they kept needing. From then on, I became the one who handled it. My name stopped meaning me. It meant reliability. It meant she won't fall apart so you can. No one asked if I wanted to be that. I learned to read the room faster than my age allowed. Knew when to step in, when to disappear, when to carry tension like a backpack no one else wanted to wear. I stayed calm when the adults didn't. That was what made me special. That was what made me so mature for my age. But you know what? No one ever asked the mature kid. Are you tired? Do you want someone to sit with you even if you're not crying? I didn't throw tantrums. I didn't ask for toys I knew we couldn't afford. I gave up the last piece of cake because it's just food. I stayed in my room when company came over because you know how to make yourself small. They loved me for that, loved how little I asked for. So I learned to become low volume, low needs, easy to praise, easy to forget. I learned to shrink without looking like I was disappearing. Sometimes I wonder if I had cried harder, if I had thrown things, if I had refused to clean up other people's messes. Would someone have stopped long enough to say, "Hey, you don't have to"? But I didn't. I held it together. Because someone had to. Because the air in that house didn't allow two people to fall apart at once. And somewhere in there, I confused endurance with identity. I became someone people leaned on before I even knew how to stand on my own. They praised me for being the glue, the steady one, the no-drama girl. But glue cracks too. And silence gets heavy when no one ever asks why you stopped speaking. By high school, I was already the friend who listened more than she talked, who remembered birthdays but forgot her own, who knew how to offer the right words at the right time but never used them on herself. I once sat in a school bathroom for 40 minutes because my chest was tightening and my throat wouldn't open. I didn't call anyone. I didn't want to be a burden. I walked out, smiled at my teacher, and said I had a little headache. They said I was brave. I nodded. I got good at hiding the cracks, and people, they got used to not looking for them. I didn't know then that the more capable you appear, the less care you receive. That competence becomes camouflage, that people don't ask if you're okay when they think you never break. And maybe that's when I started to forget what asking for help even sounded like. There's this moment I keep going back to, not because it was dramatic, but because it was nothing. I was 15. My father was late again. Dinner was cold. My little brother had homework. The dog had chewed the sofa cushion, and I just stood there, heated up the food, helped with fractions, said goodnight like it didn't bother me. And in the hallway, my aunt passed me and said, "You're the strong one. We don't worry about you." That line stayed with me. It wasn't meant as cruelty. It was meant as comfort, but it felt like a weight I didn't remember picking up. We don't worry about you. Because I didn't let them, because I had learned early that worry was currency. And I didn't deserve any. I think back to that girl, quiet, capable, careful, not to need too much. I want to hold her. Tell her she didn't need to earn her right to be cared for. Tell her that holding it together for everyone else isn't love. It's slow erasure, but I didn't know that yet. Back then, I just kept going. I thought strength meant surviving without showing pain. I didn't know it would cost me presence, cost me softness, cost me the right to fall apart in someone else's arms. They said I could take it, so I did, and no one asked if I should. No one asked if I should. But they kept needing me too, and I kept giving quietly until I almost disappeared in the act of being dependable. That's the thing about being the strong one. It's not a label, it's a role. And once you play it well enough, people forget it's a performance. They stop checking the script. They stop asking if you still want the part. They just assume you'll show up again and again. Because that's what you do, right? You're the one who keeps it together, who smooths it over, who holds space when no one else can handle the noise in the room. I became that woman, the steady one, the calm voice when someone else panicked, the listener in long phone calls that started with, "Sorry to unload, but I know you can handle it." And I could. But that's not the same as wanting to. It crept in slowly, the way people only called when things were falling apart, the way I stopped being invited to joy and only summoned for crisis. No one meant to use me, but I had made it so easy. The less I asked for, the more I was praised. "You're so grounded. You've got such a good head on your shoulders. I wish I could be more like you." They said these things with admiration, but under it, I heard something else. I heard you're not allowed to unravel. You're not allowed to need. And so I didn't. Even in love, I played the part. Not because I was trying to impress, but because it's all I knew. I didn't text when I felt off. I didn't ask for reassurance. I didn't say, "Please don't leave me hanging." I swallowed the urge to say I feel small right now, because I thought, what if that made me too much? I remember a night, it was late, maybe past midnight, and I was lying on his couch after a long day. I hadn't said much. My body ached. He looked over and smiled. "You're so chill. It's one of the things I love about you." I smiled back, but inside something tightened. Because that night I wasn't chill. I was quiet, because I didn't know how to say, "I feel like you haven't seen me for weeks. I feel like I'm fading." But how do you say that when the very thing people value in you is your silence? I realized something brutal that year. People love the version of you that makes them feel safest. And the safest version of me was the one who never interrupted, never needed, never cried. I started noticing the imbalance, how I asked others how they were, and they never asked back. How I sent long, thoughtful messages and got emojis in return. How I remembered their work presentations, their anniversaries, their stressful weeks, and no one noticed mine. It wasn't malicious, but it was loud. The absence of care, when you're always the one giving it, it echoes. There was one evening, a birthday dinner for a friend. I showed up, brought a gift, stayed late to help clean up. No one asked how I was, not once. I walked home in the dark heels clicking against the sidewalk and thought I could vanish, and they'd notice the missing help, not the missing person. That's when it hit me, being okay had become my currency. It's how I bought belonging, how I paid for love, with silence, with endurance, with not needing too much. And the thing is, it worked. People liked me, people leaned on me, people trusted me, but they didn't know me because I had never given them a chance to. Or maybe I had, and they just didn't take it. Either way, the result was the same. I was present, I was helpful, I was appreciated, but I wasn't held, not really, not when it counted. I started testing it gently. I sent a message one night, short but honest, "Hey, today was hard." Just needed to say that out loud. No reply. The next morning I got a meme. No acknowledgement, no "you okay?" Just a joke, a deflection, a reminder that I wasn't allowed to shift the tone. So I stopped testing, and I started watching. How many people in my life knew what my silence meant? How many of them had ever asked how I refill myself? When all I ever do is pour, the answer hurt, not because it was cruel, but because it was honest. I had trained them this way, taught them that I'd show up no matter what, taught them I didn't flinch, didn't bend, didn't break. I had made strength look effortless, and they believed me. But the effort was never small. It was just quiet, invisible, like a bridge no one thanks until it collapses. The thing about being the strong one is that you don't stop when the context changes. You don't suddenly become soft because the space says love. You just carry it differently. I didn't know that I was loving like a job until I was too tired to clock in. It wasn't always loud, the exhaustion. Sometimes it was subtle. A sigh I didn't mean to let out. A pause before replying to, "Can I vent for a sec?" A moment where I almost asked, "And what about me?" but didn't. I loved him the way I had always been trained to love. Quietly, efficiently, unconditionally. Like a nurse on a double shift, like a mother without weekends. Like a system that doesn't allow outages. I called it love, but now I'm not so sure. He was soft-spoken, distant. Said he had a lot going on. I understood. Of course I did. I'd always understood. So when he withdrew, I leaned in. When he doubted himself, I filled the silence with belief. When he disappeared for days, I waited and then welcomed. I thought love meant stay, even when it empties you, especially then. I thought, if I can just be steady enough, gentle enough, patient enough, he'll feel safe. And when he feels safe, he'll come back. He did come back, but not for me. For the safety, I became a place, not a person, a holding ground for his storm, a sanctuary he didn't have to clean up after. And he loved me for it, or he said he did. He'd look at me with those tired eyes and say, "You're so calming. You're the only person who doesn't ask anything of me." And I'd smile, because I thought that meant I was special. But what it really meant was I was invisible enough not to disrupt him. What I thought was intimacy was actually convenience. He never asked what I needed, and I never made him. Because somewhere along the way, I'd learned if you ask too much, they leave. If you speak your ache, they hear complaint. If you set a boundary, they see a wall. So I bent. Not all at once. Bending doesn't work like that. It starts as compromise, turns into pattern, becomes identity. I stopped asking to be walked home, stopped mentioning when plans were forgotten, stopped pointing out how often he'd go silent, how rarely he'd say good morning, how even in bed, his hand stopped searching for mine. He used to tell me I was so easy to love. I thought that was a compliment, but it was a warning. It meant you require nothing. You won't interrupt my selfishness. You will make room even when there's none left for you. And I did. Because I thought love was a form of emotional labor. You clean up their past. You wait out their moods. You carry their doubts until they feel light again. No one taught me that being strong in love doesn't mean staying silent. It doesn't mean swallowing your loneliness just because theirs looks louder. There was a night late autumn I sat on his porch while he ranted about work, about his ex, about the world. I listened, nodded, rubbed his back, said, "You're doing your best." Then he turned to me and said, "God, I love that you're not dramatic. You're just solid." I looked at him and realized he had never asked how I was, not once, not in hours. He loved the container, not what was inside. I was pouring out warmth, steadiness, calm, and no one thought to ask where it came from, or if it would run out. But it does. Even oceans dry when no one brings rain. One day I woke up and didn't feel like texting first, didn't feel like being the understanding one, didn't feel like reminding someone how to love me. And nothing happened. He didn't ask where I was, didn't follow up, didn't notice the silence. It was that quiet, that easy, that final. Not a breakup, not a conversation, just evaporation. And I realized something that morning, standing barefoot in my kitchen, holding a cup of tea I made for myself. I have loved like a job, but I was never on the payroll. No sick days, no days off, no thanks. Only expectations, only endurance, only, "You've got this." But I didn't want to got this anymore. I didn't want to be the emotional receptionist in someone else's building. Didn't want to be the soft landing for people who never asked where I learned to fall so quietly. I wanted to be held, chosen, listened to without fixing, loved without having to earn it. But I hadn't given myself that, not once. So I stopped. Not loudly, not dramatically, just gently. I let the weight stay on the floor. I let the silence stretch between us, and I didn't fill it this time. And he didn't cross it. That was the answer, the kind no one says out loud, but it still arrives. Sometimes people don't walk away. They just stop turning around when you do. He didn't chase me, and I didn't go back. Not because I stopped caring, but because I finally saw the cost. And it was me. But what surprised me wasn't the silence between us. It was the silence after. No one asked why I left. Not my friends, not his. They assumed I was fine, because I always am right. "Good for you," they said, when I told them it had ended. "You're so strong for walking away. You always bounce back." I nodded like I always do, because the alternative telling them I was exhausted, that I'd been empty for months, that I didn't want to bounce back, this time felt like too much. Strength had become my script, and people liked me better when I stuck to it. But I was starting to notice the edges of their compliments, how each one wrapped around me like ribbon bright and soft, until I tried to move. You're amazing. I don't know how you do it. You're always so composed. I wish I had your resilience. They meant well, but it wasn't about me. It was about what I made easier for them. Because if I'm always okay, they never have to sit in discomfort. If I never break down, they don't have to wonder how to hold me. Praise can be its own kind of prison, especially when you've been told your whole life that your worth is in how much you can carry. I started seeing it everywhere, in family, in work, in friendships. That quiet pattern where the ones who gushed about how capable I was were also the first to fall silent when I said I'm not okay. Not because they were cruel, but because they didn't know how to hold me without the armor. There was a moment months after I left him when a coworker came into the break room crying. She was overwhelmed, apologetic, raw. I made tea and I sat with her. I said nothing that needed fixing. She looked at me and said, "I wish I could be like you. So calm, so solid." I smiled, but inside something snapped gently like thread being stretched too thin. Because that morning, I had sat in my car for 20 minutes trying to convince myself to walk inside. I hadn't eaten breakfast. My stomach hurt. I hadn't slept more than 4 hours in 3 days. And still all they saw was calm. The truth is, I wasn't solid. I was just practiced at masking, at making other people comfortable, at not flinching in public spaces. But calm isn't the absence of chaos. Sometimes it's just exhaustion wearing lipstick. And strength, as they praised it, wasn't love. It was usefulness. They loved me because I didn't need, because I didn't take up space, because I made their own storms feel smaller. But what happens when I do need, when I say I can't carry this right now? When I finally whisper, "Can someone just hold me?" They freeze. The same people who praised me for being the strong one don't know what to do when I stop performing it. They fall quiet. They change the subject. They remind me how resilient I've always been, as if that erases the ache. It's strange, isn't it? How easily care can turn into expectation. How quickly you're so good at holding it together becomes please don't fall apart in front of me. There was a day I left a voice message for an old friend, honest, unfiltered, soft. I said I think I'm tired in a way sleep can't fix. She replied with a heart emoji and a link to a self-care podcast. And I realized people had stopped seeing me as someone who needed. They saw me as a source, a stable signal, a generator that doesn't turn off. But even engines burn out. Even lighthouses need repair. Even strong women need to be asked. When's the last time someone carried you? I don't blame them. Not entirely. Because I helped write the story. I smiled through the tired. I said I've got it too many times. I wore capability like perfume until it became my skin. But now I'm trying something else. I don't deflect every time someone says, "How are you?" I don't always say "no worries" when I'm let down. I don't soften my tone to make people more comfortable when I say I'm not available for that anymore. It's uncomfortable. People pause longer now. Some drift away. Some don't know what to do with the version of me that doesn't bend on cue. But others, they stay. They listen differently. They ask again, even if the first answer was fine. They see the shift not as distance, but as honesty. And that feels closer than any praise ever did. Because I'm learning love that only recognizes you when you're convenient is not love. It's consumption, and I'm not here to be consumed, so others can stay comfortable. It didn't happen all at once. I didn't wake up and decide to leave. There was no moment of shouting, no slammed doors, no dramatic scene in the rain. The shift was quieter than that, gentler, almost invisible. It began in the smallest ways. A message left unanswered, not out of anger, just no energy to fill the space. A favor declined with a soft, "I can't this week." Not because I was busy, but because I was finally starting to notice how tired I was. Not just body tired, soul tired, the kind of tired that comes from years of translating your needs into silence. I didn't call it leaving back then. I just called it less. Less explaining, less smoothing over, less apologizing for needing room to breathe. I remember the first time someone noticed. A friend asked, "Are you okay?" "You've been a little distant," and I wanted to say no. I've just stopped managing your comfort. But instead I smiled. said I'm just resting more lately. She nodded, relieved by the simplicity. No follow-up. They liked it better when I stayed tidy, but I was starting to unravel not into chaos but into quiet, into space I hadn't allowed myself before. The kind of space where I didn't always have to be reachable, didn't always have to be the first to respond, didn't always have to know the right thing to say. And when I stopped performing consistency, something strange happened. Not everyone noticed. Not everyone asked. Some just adjusted. Found new people to lean on, new sources of comfort, new listeners. At first that stung, like being replaced, like realizing your presence was more about what you gave than who you were. But then came the relief. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was clean, untouched by expectation. I didn't miss fixing everything. I missed being seen without having to earn it. And in that missing, I found the difference between being important and being valuable. When I was important, it was because I made things easier. When I was valuable, it was because I existed even when I stopped doing. That realization didn't roar. It didn't crash through my life. It whispered, late at night, early in the morning. In the seconds between, I should reach out, and maybe I won't. That was how it started. Not by saying goodbye, but by not saying anything at all. I stopped chasing clarity. Stopped rereading old messages, looking for signs I missed. Stopped justifying why I pulled away. Because for the first time, I wasn't trying to be understood. I was trying to be well. And it turns out those two things are rarely the same. I thought letting go would feel like failure, but it didn't. It felt like rest, like sitting down after holding a posture too long, like exhaling without realizing you've been holding your breath for years. Some people mistook it for coldness, said I was different, said I wasn't as available anymore, that I used to be so reliable. And they were right. I wasn't available in the same way, because I was no longer interested in being the net beneath everyone's fall, while no one checked if I was standing. I used to respond within minutes, now hours, sometimes days, not to punish, but because I no longer felt the urgency to prove I cared through immediacy. I still care, deeply, but I've learned that caring doesn't always mean carrying, and silence isn't always distance. Sometimes it's healing. I had a friend once who said, "You're always so present," and for years I thought that was a compliment. Now I hear the other side of that sentence, "You're always here." So I never had to be. So I started leaving space, letting conversations end without trying to tie a bow, letting people feel uncomfortable when I said no, letting things fall that were never mine to hold. Not out of bitterness, but because I finally saw how heavy it had all become. Leaving didn't look like running. It looked like stillness, like no longer rearranging myself to fit, like watching a room I used to light up and realizing I don't miss it. Some exits don't need doors, just the decision to stop entering. I didn't make an announcement, didn't post a goodbye, didn't explain why I wasn't the same anymore. I just stopped showing up where I wasn't seen, and when no one came looking, I knew I had done the right thing. I thought once I stepped back, the weight would vanish, that I'd feel light, free, whole again. But instead there was guilt, not sharp, not loud, just a dull hum in the background. A quiet ache that whispered, "You left them behind." It didn't matter that I was running on empty. Didn't matter that no one had asked how I was not really. What I felt was like abandoning someone I once swore I'd never give up on. That's the trap, isn't it? When you've always been the one who stays, leaving doesn't feel like a choice. It feels like a betrayal. I had to remind myself I didn't walk away from a person. I walked away from a role that never let me sit down. But my body hadn't caught up with that truth yet. There were nights I replayed everything, went over each conversation, every silence I didn't fill, every text I left unanswered. Not because I wanted to go back, but because I wanted to be sure I hadn't been cruel. And still a part of me whispered, "You should have stayed a little longer. You should have tried one more time." That voice wasn't mine. It belonged to every version of me that believed love was earned through endurance. The girl who thought being good meant being useful. The woman who thought letting go meant giving up. The strong one who was terrified of being called selfish. That's what they say, right? When you stop saving people, that you've changed, that you've become cold, that you think you're better. But I didn't stop caring. I just stopped bleeding to prove it. There's a difference. And yet, when I saw them struggle without me, I felt it in my throat, the old reflex to step in, to reach back, to make sure they landed safely. Even after everything I still had, to fight the urge to be the net. Because somewhere deep down, I believed their pain was my responsibility. That belief wasn't compassion, it was conditioning. A lifetime of being told that my value was measured by how much I could carry for other people. But love is not a rescue mission, and care is not custody. It took me a long time to say that without shaking. There was a moment a few weeks after I went quiet when one of them reached out, not with concern, not with curiosity, just a message that read, "I really need you right now. Please don't shut down on me. No, how are you? No, are you okay?" Just the same expectation in softer language. And for a second, I almost went back. Almost apologized for the distance. Almost forgot that I had been drowning too. But then I paused, and I remembered they weren't asking for me. They were asking for the version of me that didn't need anything back. So I didn't answer. And that silence felt louder than any no I'd ever spoken. The guilt didn't disappear, but I stopped letting it decide for me. I started writing down all the things I used to give without noticing time. Emotional labor, soothing second chances, being the translator of someone else's rage, being the mirror that made them feel good about themselves. None of it was ever named, but it was expected. And now, without my presence to fulfill that script, they were left with themselves. That's what they never tell you about healing. Sometimes the most generous thing you can do is let people face their own noise without offering them your silence as a pillow. There's grief in that, not for the person, but for the role you no longer occupy. I didn't just lose them. I lost the part of me that believed she was only worthy when she was saving someone. I mourned her because she was kind and loving and tried so hard, but she was never at peace, not really. She lived on high alert, tuned to other people's moods, rewarded for being low maintenance, expected to be endlessly available. She meant well, but she forgot herself. And now, as I sit in this quieter life with fewer calls and less noise, and no one asking for the version of me that doesn't exist anymore, I miss her sometimes, but I don't want her back, because she never felt safe unless someone else needed her. And now I'm learning how to feel safe even when no one calls. Even when I'm not the hero, even when there's no one to fix. I'm not the savior anymore. And yes, sometimes that still stings. Sometimes it feels like absence, like loss. But most days it feels like breathing. No one tells you what comes after strength. They tell you it's freedom. They tell you it's peace. They tell you it's soft mornings and deep breaths, and finally having time for yourself. And it is, but it's also quiet, unfamiliar, sometimes a little hollow. Because when you've spent your life being strong for everyone else, you don't really know what to do when there's no one left to be strong for. The silence it hits differently, not loud, not violent, but wide. Like a field that stretches on with no signs, no fences, no directions. At first, I kept expecting someone to call, to need me, to pull me back into their chaos, to say I miss you being around. Things aren't the same without you, but they didn't, and nothing broke, nothing collapsed. The world kept spinning without my holding it up. And that shook me more than I expected, because if everything keeps going without you, you start to wonder if you ever mattered. But slowly, so slowly, I almost missed it. Something else began to take shape. Space, not empty, just open. I stopped waking up anxious, stopped checking my phone the moment my eyes opened, stopped rehearsing conversations in my head before I even had them. I started walking, not far, just around the block, without purpose, without a call in my ear, without filling the silence. I started making meals for myself that weren't eaten over a keyboard. I started reading again, not for knowledge, not to fix myself, just because words started feeling like home again. And in that stillness, I started hearing something I hadn't heard in years. Myself, not the version that performed for safety, not the one who managed the room, not the one who anticipated everyone's needs 5 steps ahead. Just me, tired, soft-spoken, curious, real. I didn't rush to define her, Didn't try to dress her up in productivity. Didn't ask her to be inspiring. I just let her exist. And in that space, I began to understand something I never could when I was carrying everyone else. I'm allowed to be loved even when I'm not useful. I'm allowed to take up space without shrinking for someone else's comfort. I'm allowed to rest without apology. That kind of permission doesn't come from the outside. It's not granted by someone's understanding. It comes from the quiet decision to no longer abandon yourself to keep someone else from drowning. Because maybe, just maybe, they were never swimming. Maybe they were pulling. And I was calling it connection. But now I know better. Now I know that love doesn't always look like staying. Sometimes love is the choice to leave so you can finally come home to yourself. And the strangest part, the longer I stayed in this stillness, the less I missed the noise. There was a kind of detox, like grief but softer, a releasing of roles I never consented to. Caretaker, fixer, interpreter, anchor. I put them down, and the sky didn't fall. No one blamed me, no one chased me, but no one thanked me either. That used to hurt. Now it just tells me I made the right decision. Because if your presence was only valued for what it produced, then your absence will only be felt as inconvenience. I don't need to be missed that way. I don't need my departure to be someone else's lesson. I just need my peace to be real. And now it is, not perfect, not always quiet, but mine. There are still days when I ache to reach back. Not because I want to return, but because the muscle memory of being needed doesn't fade overnight. But I remind myself being needed is not the same as being loved. Being useful is not the same as being seen. Being strong is not the same as being whole. So I stay here, in this life I've rebuilt, in this version of me that doesn't perform strength, but lives gently, deeply, and without permission. This isn't the victory I once imagined. There's no applause. No one claps when a woman finally chooses herself quietly. But that's okay. I didn't do it to be seen. I did it so I could finally look in the mirror and not see the weight of everyone else on my shoulders. And for the first time in years, I don't feel tired when I wake up. I feel here. I didn't leave with a speech. There was no final conversation. No dramatic pause at the door. No carefully chosen words to explain why I wouldn't be staying. I didn't know that, not anymore. Because the truth is, by the time I left, I'd already been gone for a while. Leaving doesn't always look like walking out. Sometimes it looks like not leaning in, not replying right away, not remembering the dates they never remembered for me. Sometimes it looks like closing the tab, putting down the phone, letting the silence breathe, instead of suffocating it with softness. I didn't leave to be seen. Didn't leave so they'd chase after me. Didn't leave to prove a point. I left because staying meant staying small. And I was tired of being a version of myself that only existed to hold other people up. You don't realize how heavy it was until you stop carrying it. You don't realize how loud it's been until the quiet finally comes. And when it did, I didn't fill it. I let it stay. Let it stretch. Let it ask its own questions. Let it echo the words I had never said out loud. I'm done saving people who don't want to be saved. I'm done proving I can endure. I'm done making love out of sacrifice. I thought they'd notice. I did. I thought one day someone would say, "You haven't been around. You don't reach out anymore." That they'd ask, not because I was useful, but because I was missed. They didn't. And that silence, once terrifying, became my answer. You learn a lot in the quiet about who checks in, who only calls when they need something, who notices when your light dims, and who only ever came for the warmth. Some people lose you, not because you stopped loving them, but because you finally remembered you deserve to be held too. And when you've spent your life being the safe place, you don't always know what it feels like to have one. But now I do. It's not big, it's not loud, it's a room where nothing is expected of me, where I can sit with my back against the wall and not have to explain why I'm quiet, where no one mistakes stillness for invitation. I don't need revenge. I don't need recognition. I don't need them to wake up one day and say she was the best thing we never held on to. Let them forget. Let them think I'm cold. Let them tell the story in their own way. I'm not here to correct the record. I'm just not here. And maybe that's the real ending. Not the moment I left, but the moment I stopped trying to be understood by people who only listened when I was fixing something. There's a kind of power in not explaining, not defending, not cleaning up after the fallout of your absence. They'll say she changed. They're right, I did. But it wasn't sudden, it wasn't sharp, it was slow, steady, almost unnoticeable. Like a tree bending away from the shadow, like a tide that stops coming in, like someone who used to wait at the door and now doesn't. They say you don't know what you have until it's gone. But sometimes you never really had it. You were just keeping it alive, and when you stop, it dies quietly, just like I left. No warning, no anger, no fire, just air, just space. Just me, finally somewhere. I don't have to translate my worth into labor. Somewhere I am not strong, not steady, not useful, just here, still, whole. They said I was the strong one. That's why I had to leave, and I did. Softly. So softly they didn't even hear the door close behind me.